told not to show up in Lower Manhattan tomorrow, which is, of course, the 11th. There's going to be a major event.
MSNBC investigated the hundreds of reports of individuals in the towers being told not to go to work that day or being told to get out early that morning. And they found out that, yes, it was not an urban legend. It was true. They found hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of witnesses. And then the Israeli instant messaging company, Odago, admitted publicly, told Haaretz, one of the biggest papers in Israel, that yes, they got a warning and instant messaged hundreds of their employees in the towers and told them to leave the building 4 hours before the planes slammed into it. This is on the record and cannot be ignored. Students pointed up at the towers and told their school teachers in the weeks before 9/11 that those buildings are about to come down. They're about to be destroyed. And then on top of this, we have the public officials being warned. Total evidence of prior knowledge. And while we were in New York, we talked to dozens of eyewitnesses who had been personally warned themselves, but were afraid to come public. Some have been told to keep their mouths shut.
I was a rescue worker. I will say that I spoke to a cop on 9/11 who said that it was going to come down. I don't know how he knew that. He did tell me before it happened, before the fact that it was coming down.
The widows from the police department and the fire department were standing at the new school in back for the 2 days, and they were screaming at the media, please pay attention. We got phone calls. We listened that their husbands or their children were saying there's explosives coming on like the 23rd, 26th floor before the buildings went down. And the media started laughing and said, we have no time to hear you.
Larry Silverstein originally owned Building 7, and a few months before 9/11, he bought the entire complex, all 7 of the buildings, and then he took out a record insurance policy on them. Building 7 and what happened to it is so important because the official story is 2 jets flew into the buildings, we all agree on that, and that their jet fuel caused the steel to melt and caused them to collapse. But then we look at Building 7, which was the furthest away of any of these buildings from Tower 1 and 2, and it wasn't even damaged, but later that afternoon caught on fire. Now they've rebuilt Building 7. Here's Tower 1 and 2. Obviously, you all know those were hit by jet aircraft. And then we have Building 7, the furthest away from all the other buildings. Building 7 was 47 stories tall. Building 7 was not hit by an aircraft. Building 7 did not catch fire from these buildings. But later in the afternoon, mysteriously, it caught on fire. And then after 4:30 p.m., the firefighters told everybody to get back. They were, quote, going to pull the building, the demolition term for demolishing one. They told Associated Press reporters, get back, we're going to pull it. And this building that wasn't hit by a plane, that had no damage to it, collapsed symmetrically. Building 7 was a block away where my hand is. But the red flashing square is where Bankers Trust still stands today. It had Tower 1 fall onto it, but just had light damage. The owner, Larry Silverstein, of the entire complex, got on TV and said that they had blown up Building 7. He said they pulled it, demolition. Well, Silverstein owned them all.
Oh, Silverstein owned all the buildings.
Yeah.
How many buildings are gone?
All of them.
How many is that?
That's right. That plane wasn't, that building wasn't hit by a plane.
9 buildings are gone.
Yeah.
Thousands of people lost their
That
lives.
building.
Hundreds more. No.
And there's an official U.S. government plan to carry out the attacks.
He imploded that building on himself.
He admitted it. He said it on television.
He brought that building out.
Yes. Larry Silverstein.
So you understand?
Larry Silverstein on America Rebuilding on PBS said that they blew up Building 7.
Building up 7. Even though.
He saw it. Did you see it on PBS?
Yeah, he pulled it.
He said on PBS, he said, we pulled the building. PBS.
Oh, yeah, he pulled the building.
Pelted by debris when the North Tower collapsed. 7 burned until late afternoon, allowing occupants to evacuate to safety.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. And I said, you know, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
Yeah, he said we're going to pull. He said we're going to pull the building. Silverstein said we're going to pull the building.
And we got the firemen saying they pulled it. I mean, Silverstein goes on PBS and says it, and we're the weirdos when he says it on TV. Unbelievable. Let's see that one more time.
Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
In the tragic days after 9/11, many prominent engineers across the world went public and said there's no way that fire destroyed any of those buildings. It's never happened to a modern building. Buildings have burned for 6-7 days before, and it hasn't happened. The answer was hidden in plain view. Larry Silverstein went on PBS and said that they had pulled the building, demolition term for destroying it. In fact, the local public radio station was told that they were going to demolish Building 7. But since then, the public has been told to be quiet, not to ask questions. And the government hasn't even given us an official story of why Building 7 fell. They say they think fire caused it to fall. And in case you're wondering what pull it means, here's another example, where they again use the term pull it to mean controlled demolition of buildings. Months after 9/11, the remains of 4, 5, and 6 were destroyed. Here's a clip from the same PBS documentary, where the head of engineering for the city of New York describes pull it as a controlled demolition.
By mid-December, the Department of Design and Construction had leveled World Trade Center buildings 4 and 5.
Hello? Oh, we're getting ready to pull Building 6.
We had to be very careful how we demolished Building 6. We were worried about the Building 6 coming down and then damaging the slurry wall, so we wanted that particular building to fall within a certain area.
There's a certain excitement in the air of bringing the last structure down at the World Trade Center.
Seconds after 7 collapsed, this is what Dan Rather had to say about it.
Large building. In most other cities, it'd be one of the largest buildings in town, probably. Trade Center Building 7 has collapsed. Now, here we're going to show you a videotape of the collapse itself. Now we go to videotape, the collapse of this building.
It's amazing.
Amazing, incredible, pick your word. For the 3rd time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
Just in case you missed it, here it is again.
Deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down. Deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
This is a photo taken 1 second into Building 7's collapse. Notice the crimp. If we look at other controlled demolitions, we see that they first blow one of the central columns so the building falls in on itself. If you don't do this, the building falls outward and has a wider collapse radius and can damage surrounding structures. This was not the case with Building 7. Building 7 had a classic crimp or wedge. Its central column was blown out first, so it didn't structurally damage buildings just a few feet away from it.
Building 7, while I was listening to live feed from our local public radio station later in the afternoon, they talked about Building 7. Building 7 was fine. There was no airplane that hit it. And then they even began to ruminate on the air about demolishing the building. I said, well, I don't know. I mean, you can put out fires. You know, why would you talk about demolishing a building that, you know, it wasn't hit by anything? You know, the fires weren't bad or anything like that.
What was in Building 7? Well, the Department of Defense, the Central Intelligence Agency, FEMA, U.S. Secret Service, Securities and Exchange Commission, and the city's main command bunker, overseeing the entire operation. That's what was in Building 7, a structure that was over-engineered, that could stand thousands and thousands and thousands of degrees of temperature for days if need be. But it collapsed in just a few seconds. Here we are, smack dab, right in the middle of Silverstein Properties. In the next few minutes, we're going to talk about Mr. Silverstein and go over the history of the World Trade Center complex and some very serious questions that need to be answered.